Okay, folks, welcome back to the second season of Don't Dwell on It. Super happy to have you joining us. Hi, just a reminder, my name is Harris Ligon, CEO, founder here at Telegraph, and I'm joined with
Sydney Schreiber.
And we're super excited because we are taking you through into what was originally an experiment and now working through kind of the second season. And so as we continue down this journey, we'd love to hear from you, the audience, a little bit more about some things that maybe you might like to learn a little bit about or hear discussed. So if you have any ideas or thoughts or any desires, please let us know.
Right in.
So, Sydney, 25.
What a year. I think when I look back at 2025, it felt like the never-ending saga of rail. News, drama. It honestly felt like the Real Housewives of Railroads was the 2025 theme. Harris, what would you mention as like the chapter closes on 2025? What would you call 2025?
Other than a Bravo TV show? Yeah, 2025 felt like a little bit of a year of distraction. And if we kind of think about that more broadly, it's not just within the industry itself. I think one of the really, really interesting things is that supply chains in general, and I think transportation networks in North America, faced a lot of uncertainty that was not really self-inflicted. And so I think there are a lot of macro themes that felt like we were waiting to really understand tariffs. We were waiting to really understand consumer demand. We were really trying to understand what the outlook for the broader construction industry would look like. And so a lot of those things actually didn't really avail themselves over the last 12 months. And I think the bigger question is obviously, and we'll talk about this as the world turns, I'm not really sure we're gonna know a lot about the macro conditions even into 2026. And so I think this is definitely, just for me, from a thematic standpoint, feel like this has been the year of distraction.
Yeah, I think the year of uncertainty.
So, Sydney, one of the things that, when we were kind of thinking about this episode and like everybody else who's listening, attempting to wrap up the year, what were some of the themes that really stuck out to you for 2025?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think a common theme we saw, especially from the shipper and 3PL perspective, was really around just consistency and predictability. So from what we were hearing with our partners and just what we're hearing, across the industry is really, hey, less about we're caring about train speeds. We're caring about, getting our goods faster. It's how can we actually have a more reliable way to plan and predict?
There's nothing worse than a railroad patting themselves on the back and saying that their dwell times are the lowest that they've ever been and not having anything particularly meaningful for you as a customer, right?
Yeah.
Are we calling out a specific railroad, Harris?
I'm just going to say it sometimes feels like there is a little bit of a Mean Girls theme where you've got maybe a railroad consistently calling out that they're not like other railroads. They're a cool railroad. Just want to call that
Can
out.
we trademark Pick Me Railroad?
I mean, this is very much the Real Housewives of Railroads.
So when you were saying something like consistency,
Yeah.
and I think we hear a lot of these words used, reliability, like what do you think really moves the needle from your perspective?
I mean, I think really they don't want perfect transportation. They know that that's not obtainable currently, that's not feasible. They want predictability around communication bottlenecks. They don't want to be the ones discovering problems. They want to actually be the ones informed of them.
Yeah, so it's funny because one of the things when I did my look back on 2025 and definitely not in Spotify, just to be clear about that, it was really around a lot of the weird undulating pressures that happened from tariffs.
Yeah.
And I still, sitting now in late 2025, I don't think we really know what the actual impact of tariffs is going to be because a lot of them have been retraded and they're being renegotiated. And so a lot of those things won't actually show up So I think if you were a supply chain planner in 2025, trying to think about how many rail cars you need, or like how many chassis are you potentially going to deploy in your fleet, or just how much vessel capacity you're going to need, all of these things obviously matter together. But I just felt like a year that you just couldn't plan very well.
Yeah, I think that, this year was really, hey, fleet management and utilization are always top of mind important, but it felt like 2025 was the year it was extra important.
Yeah.
Are you monitoring your turn time, your utilization rates, and really with a fine-tooth comb versus, just being, planning risk management and operational? It's really around like capacity management. It became like a really common thing, and being flexible around all of those changes and just navigating a lot of uncertainty with tariffs, with, the merger announcement. There's a lot of hot topics that came about that I think created a lot of anxiety for shippers and 3PLs specifically, because there's just a lot of uncertainty without answers of what is this actually going to do for me? How does this impact me, and why should I care about it?
You mentioned capacity, and that's one of the things where I think when we see good or marginally good service metrics around train speed or dwell, the opposite end of that we actually don't talk about, and I don't think any railroad is actually going to widely celebrate, is that volumes are at relatively low numbers compared to 5-year trailing historicals. The overall network volume is nowhere near where it once was. So I think that's one of the really interesting things, that yes, seems to be a lot of capacity that's out there today. My expectation would be, as a shipper or maybe even in a leasing company, is that asset turn time should be at their highest point ever. There should be greater utilization. And I think part of the frustrating point, and where I think some equipment owners have seen rail cars beginning to come back to them, is that the utilization has been fair, but the demand actually hasn't been there. I think that's one of the really big questions I'll eventually have for 2026. You mentioned mergers a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about how you think that's been handled, how you think it's been communicated. What do you feel like, as we're, I think at this point, still waiting for the filing to actually come in?
Yeah, folks are, taking a look at the CPKC merger and kind of seeing, is this going to be a similar token with, some of these other mergers? But I think people feel like they've been left in the dark. There's this, major announcement, but there's no real clarity around how it's actually going to, trickle down to impact the actual end shipper. And I think that, that causes a lot of anxiety, but I'd also like for us to be more hopeful. I'm more of an optimist when it comes to that, Harris, but it's kind of a wait and see game.
Yeah, and do you feel like the being left in the dark, do you feel like that is more indicative of what people just generally feel about more broadly across the industry?
Yeah, I think it's a common theme. I think, visibility is tough to come by, and I think people are really leaning into technology solutions to help bridge those gaps, but how are, they feeling like their needs are being met if it's just going to be another, Class 1 railroad merging with another Class 1 railroad not solving those problems?
Yeah, look, there's a big gap out there. I think we've been on record of not really understanding how the merger is going to solve all those items. I think one of the other challenges is that I think the STB has a process that they are looking to follow based on prior merger rules with a review. My big question is, how tightly are they going to stick to that process once the filing actually comes in? And then from there, does that create a little perspective for the broader rail community to be able to understand how the merger may adversely or positively impact their networks? Sid, how many customer trips did you take this year?
Let's go with like 15 or 16.
Oh yeah, you were out there.
I was traveling.
Yeah, you were out there quite a bit. When you're out there, what are some things that you've really heard frequently from 3PLs and shippers and a lot of the folks you were spending time with?
Yeah, I think like first and foremost, what kept coming up each and every visit is just a culture shift on wanting more customer experience. So instead of managing different portals to get a single, update on a singular shipment, they want to really focus on the overall customer experience and what they're getting in the real world today with all the different technology, but wanting it from their own workflow standpoint.
Right.
And so I think we're really going to see, I think, a shift in the coming years of people just demanding better experiences, better technology, and just easier tools to make their jobs easier. I think another thing we also were hearing a lot about is pricing volatility and, with tariffs and surcharges and, demand being up in the air, very uneven. I think really folks are focused on trying to be more flexible. So how can they really pivot and be more flexible when it comes to pricing and rate sensitivity versus these, big RFPs that have to then be repriced because there's all of this change and uncertainty in the market?
Yeah. I think the theme that I continue to hear over and over again was just this really frustration around data fragmentation. And so I think one of the unintended consequences of newer, better, or different software platforms that are now coming to market across a lot of different modes is that it means that data is beginning to live in a lot of different areas. And so this is one of the just like downstream impacts of having a lot of different providers kind of mixed up. This is much more apparent in trucking than it is maybe in rail or maybe in ocean versus some other modes. And so I think one of the things that we really got a lot of feedback on is, can you take all of these fragmented data points around rail, bring it together into a singular place that I'll be able to use it and create some value uniquely for me. And so I think there was a lot of push and pull on what that really meant and getting folks to articulate how they want to work. But I don't see the problem around data fragmentation changing much. I think that is going to continue to be an issue. And I think we even feel it as consumers, right? I mean, every time you sign up for something new, it's like a new login, a new password, and a new subset of data that you then have to manage. And I think one of the things that we have an opportunity to do is actually make all of that easier.
I agree. I think data fragmentation will continue to be a theme, but I think what you'll see with that is how do then we bridge the gap with technology.
Yeah,
that's going to be the common denominator there. I guess, setting the tone and looking into the future, what do you think is, going to be some common themes or things we should anticipate for 2026?
So exiting the year of drama and Real Housewives, and what are we going into in 2026?
Yeah, hopefully not a Real Housewives drama again.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully not. It feels like 26 is going to be the chapter or the episode title is going to be wait and see, right? Because we're effectively waiting on an industry to run a process with the STB, figure out what we're going to do with a merger.
Yep.
And then I think there is this lingering question around what's going to happen with tariffs. And so those are three big points that I think the industry is just going to have to wrestle with.
Yeah, and I think that also wait and see then allows shippers to have to wait and see. How is this going to impact my costs? How is this going to impact my rates? So it's going to be a wait and see game, but we'll be keeping you guys updated.
Yeah. So one of the conversations that feels obviously completely unfinished in 2025, we've yet to see the merger application filed, which is something I think everybody is going to want to see. And we should anticipate that will probably show up on the last working Friday of the year after 5 p.m. I think there's a desire to avoid as much scrutiny as possible around this. What are some of the conversations where you've been obviously out and about? Where do you feel like some of those conversations are unfortunately going to trip over into 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I think realistically, it's a lot of the same, conversations around how is this going to impact my business? What does this mean for me? I think that's really where we're being, where we're seeing a lot of those unanswered questions and uncertainty in times. I think, too, there's going to be a big emphasis in 2026 around differentiating yourselves.
Yep.
How do you differentiate yourself with technology? How do you differentiate yourself as a rail expert?
Right.
We're going to see people really lean into different, expertise areas, whether it's, going deeper on cross-border Mexico.
Right.
That's going to be, I think, something that we'll see, especially in the 3PL land, of being able to almost win by being a rail expert for cross-border in Mexico.
It's interesting because that market has perpetually been there for the past 10 years, and it feels like everyone wants to maximize it for the very obvious reasons. And I think we all agree, everybody's aligned that growth in Mexico is net positive for North America. The challenge is it feels like it is a is perpetually about 3 years away from becoming like a really dominant player. And so it is a very much a chicken or egg from a network solution. Do you have the solutions that serve that market today in a way that allow it to grow? Or are you waiting around for that volume to exist?
Yeah, it's like the wait and see game.
Yeah, which is, I think, thematically kind of where we're at. Some things that I'm definitely kind of rolling over in my mind are really around if you were in the market to build rail cars, and the rail car market is fairly saturated, high utilization. What does that mean for new rail cars coming off the line? Is there that much of a need to replace the current inventory that's out there? I mean, many of those fleets are aging out, so that's a very clear replacement opportunity. But are shippers going to be willing to potentially pay up for newer builds for maybe lower volume? It's an interesting thing that I've kind of been like processing.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think I'm most concerned about we're gonna hear about these capital expenditures in early 2026. First quarter, the railroads will always come out and talk about what they're doing. The short lines will talk about the Chrissy grants and how they're deploying that money back into their network. What I'm most concerned about is basically the pause that every rail operator is likely going to take on investments in people, technology. They will definitely deploy that money back into their own infrastructure. But there's going to be this kind of wait and see on what happens with the merger, because nobody's going to want to pull capital off of their balance sheet to even redeploy into their own business, because that may be capital that they need to deploy to go play offense somewhere else. So I don't think that actually puts the industry into a growth or accelerating mode. I think it is very much a pause in a defensive position.
Do you feel like that's going to then lead to who makes the first leap?
Well, I think the first leap or the first move has already been made. And so now the presiding party, the STB, is really going to determine the pace and ultimately the outcome that goes along with that. And I think part of what we are all, I think, waiting to understand after the filing comes in is, what are the items that need to be adjusted in order for that merger to go through? And so are there things that Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern as a combined entity may be willing to see to give CPKC some advantage in this deal? And so I think that is actually, there's just a lot that has to come out in that process. So I think we are all hoping that it will go quickly. I think this is going to take more time than we're actually like acknowledging. So don't dwell on it. Episode 1 of 2026. Super excited that we're here and that you're back with us. Excited to share a little bit more about what's coming up in 2026. And please stay tuned and let us know if you'd love to hear or discuss anything else.